Ever get that feeling, where it's like every day is the same and you just need something different?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so our listener today is totally feeling that whole Groundhog Day thing, and has been thinking maybe moving to Sweden in 2025 could shake things up, especially for work-life balance.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we've got a great resource for this deep dive, an article from The Broke Backpacker called Cost of Living in Sweden, Moving to Sweden in 2025 by Christina Great.
Okay, cool.
So this is like your own personal investigation. We're going to really dig into if this whole Swedish dream lines up with what you're looking for.
Right. This article is super practical about the money side of things, which is obviously a big deal if you're making a huge move like this. We really want to go beyond just the numbers, pull out the essential insights from this guide, and help you understand what it actually costs to live in Sweden. And then you can decide if that fits with your goals and what you care about.
Exactly.
So by the end of this, you should have a much better idea if this is the right path for you.
Okay, so the article jumps right in and says, Sweden has a reputation for being expensive.
Right.
Which makes sense. It has a strong economy, people can earn a lot. But here's something interesting right away. On average, living in Sweden is about 30% less expensive than places like London or New York.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's not exactly a budget destination, but it's not totally breaking the bank compared to some other big global cities you might be thinking about.
Okay.
Now, the big things that are going to affect your day-to-day costs are going to be where you choose to live and what kind of lifestyle you're picturing. So the article says Stockholm and Gothenburg, being those big cities, will usually be more expensive, especially for rent.
Makes sense.
But those cities also tend to have more co-working spaces and those all-important expat connections. So that's the network of people who've also moved to Sweden, and they can be super helpful with advice and support.
Oh, that's really interesting. It's tempting to look at smaller cities to save money.
Right.
But the article sort of suggests that having those expat connections in the bigger cities can be really valuable, especially when you're first getting settled.
For sure.
They can give you so much practical advice, from finding an apartment to just understanding how things work locally.
Yeah.
So you really have to weigh that trade-off.
Okay, so let's get specific about where your money would be going. Rent is probably going to be your biggest expense.
Right.
As it is most places, and of course it depends on location. Are you in the middle of Stockholm or a bit further out? Are you looking for your own place, or are you open to sharing with roommates?
Right.
So the article gives us some examples. A private room in Gothenburg, about $600 a month.
Okay.
Private apartment in Stockholm could be closer to $1,100. And then on the higher end, a private villa in Marstrand, which is this beautiful island, around $2,300. So that just shows you the range of what's possible.
Wow, that's a pretty big range. What I find fascinating is this tip the article mentions about longer-term rentals. They say sometimes it's better to reach out to property owners directly instead of just looking at online listings. Ah, okay. And again, those expat communities are super important for finding housing. Word of mouth, those networks, they can often help you find places that aren't advertised.
Totally. So beyond just having a place to live, you've got utilities.
Right.
The article breaks down some average costs. Electricity, around $80 a month. Water, $20. Your phone plan, about $30. Gas, $10. And internet, around $35. Those seem pretty normal, but it's worth remembering. Things like electricity that could go up or down depending on the season, especially during those long Swedish winters.
Yeah, for sure. You always have to think about those seasonal changes when you're budgeting, especially if you're not used to really cold weather.
Right. And then we get to everyone's favorite topic, food. The article says about $200 a month for groceries if you're cooking at home, and then between $300 and $400 if you're going to be eating out sometimes.
Yeah.
Average meal is about $10, and even fast food is surprisingly close at about $9.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. The article also mentions that Swedish food is different depending on where you are. So up north, you'll see more game meat, like reindeer.
Really?
Yeah. And then coastal areas, of course, lots of fish and seafood.
That makes sense.
So yeah, there are those iconic Swedish meatballs, but there's a lot more to explore.
That's cool. And it's good to know they mentioned there are more and more vegetarian and vegan options, especially in the bigger cities,
Yeah.
like a lot of places.
Yeah.
But they also make a point that a lot of food in Sweden is imported, so that could be why prices are higher than what you're used to.
Makes sense.
And those specific costs they give, like almost $5 for a gallon of milk or over $2 for a loaf of bread, really put things into perspective.
Totally. Something to keep in mind. Now let's talk about getting around. The article is really positive about Sweden's public transportation, and for good reason. So a monthly subway pass in Stockholm is about $100, and that's unlimited travel within the city. They even say that in a lot of Swedish cities, you might not even need a car.
Wow.
Yeah, which is a huge potential saving. For longer distances, you've got Flixbus, Netbus, and the trains.
Okay.
And in smaller cities, they usually have good local buses. But they really don't recommend taxis because they're surprisingly expensive, like $30 for just a 10-minute ride.
Wow.
Yeah. On the other hand, bikes are super popular and a good way to get around, at least when it's warm.
That's cool. I think the fact that public transport is so affordable and taxis are so expensive, it really shows how good the public transportation system is in Sweden.
Right.
And it's worth noting, even though the article doesn't say much about it, Sweden usually has really well-maintained roads and highways. So if you do think about getting a car, that's a plus.
Yeah.
But obviously buying a car and maintaining it, those are extra costs too.
Okay, so the article also has this category called other expenses.
Okay.
And this gives us an idea of other things you might spend money on. So they list things like hiring a housekeeper 3 times a week. That's about $450 a month.
Wow.
Then they have transportation listed again for $60.
Yeah.
So maybe that's like extra money for local travel, beyond your monthly pass or trips that aren't covered.
Okay.
Then there's gym membership, around $35 a month. A day ski pass is $40. Renting a bike for a day is $30. An hour-long Swedish massage is $70, and a yoga class is $25.
Okay.
But they also point out that there are free outdoor gyms, which I think really shows how much Swedes value being active.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and it makes it accessible for everyone.
That emphasis on free resources, like the outdoor gyms, it really does reflect their commitment to well-being and making sure everyone can participate.
Totally. So then there's drinking. The article has good news and maybe not so good news, depending on what you like. The good news is that tap water is generally safe to drink, but some restaurants might charge you a little for it. The not so good news, especially if you enjoy a drink every now and then, is that alcohol is really expensive. Like beer can be 3 times more expensive than in neighboring countries.
Right.
And hard liquor can be double what you're used to. So the article says a lot of Swedes actually travel to other countries to buy their alcohol.
Oh, wow, that's crazy. Yeah, that higher cost of alcohol is definitely something to think about if you're used to going out or having drinks with friends.
Right.
It's just different policies and taxes compared to a lot of other places.
Right. And lastly, when it comes to cost, the article talks about hidden costs, which is so important with any big move. They say you need to be prepared for unexpected things like last-minute flights home if there's a family emergency or something.
Right.
And they really recommend having some savings set aside. You just never know, and having that cushion can give you peace of mind.
Yeah, definitely. You always have to have a plan for those unexpected things. It's just smart when you're moving to a new country.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about money, but moving isn't just about the financial side of things.
Of course not.
The article talks about why people love living in Sweden, those quality of life things, like they're always at the top of those happiness rankings.
Yeah, they are.
And they have a reputation for being inclusive and welcoming to people from other countries.
Right.
And it's interesting, even though it's a big economic hub, cities like Stockholm somehow keep that charming small town feeling.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, that mix of having great job opportunities and then also having a more relaxed and beautiful place to live. That's really appealing to a lot of people.
Yeah, totally. And of course, Sweden is known for work-life balance, which is probably a big reason why you're thinking about moving there.
Right.
To get away from that Groundhog Day feeling.
It's not just something they talk about. It's really part of their culture.
Yeah.
Things like having a lot of vacation time and really focusing on getting things done at work so you can have time for yourself.
Yeah. And then there's healthcare.
Right.
The article says Sweden's healthcare system is amazing, one of the best in the world, and most people use the public system.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the important thing. As a non-resident, at least when you first get there, you'll probably need private health insurance. They even mention a company called Safety Wing.
Okay.
Yeah. And they also make it clear that you usually need to become a resident to use the public healthcare system. So that's a big difference to keep in mind.
Yeah, healthcare is obviously super important. And you really need to know the rules for non-residents and residents before you go.
Definitely. Education is another thing the article mentions. They have a great education system. And what's interesting is that public and private schools are pretty equal in terms of what they teach.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But if you're looking at international schools, those can get expensive, like anywhere from $3,000 to $11,000 a year.
Wow. Yeah, that is a big range. The fact that they have the same curriculum for public and private schools,
Yeah.
it really shows how much they value equality.
Right.
Everyone gets a good education.
Yeah. When it comes to safety, Sweden is known for being really safe. Low crime rates, not a lot of environmental problems. But the article still says it's good to have insurance, just in case.
Yeah. Peace of mind is so important no matter where you live, and insurance can help with that.
Exactly. And finally, let's talk about the culture.
Okay.
The article describes Sweden as welcoming and inclusive, a place where they really value equality and individual freedoms. They're big on environmentalism and sustainability, lots of organic food, big recycling programs.
Right.
They also say that Swedes can seem a bit shy at first, but once you get to know them, they have a great sense of humor. And they love spending time outdoors, like hiking and stuff.
I love that. Yeah, that focus on both individual freedom and doing things together, especially for the environment. That's really what Sweden is about.
Yeah. Okay, so we've covered the cost, the quality of life. Now let's get practical. Like, how do you actually move to Sweden?
Right.
The article talks about finding a job, and they say the job market can be tough. And for a lot of jobs, you might need to know Swedish.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But they suggest maybe starting your search with international companies because they might help you relocate.
Okay.
Or maybe look into teaching English.
Okay.
You usually need a TEFL certification for that. Now, this is interesting for you, our listener, especially if you work remotely.
Yeah.
You can actually stay in Sweden for up to 90 days without needing a visa.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, so that could be a great chance to go there, experience it, and see if you actually like it.
That is a good opportunity to test it out before you commit to the whole visa process.
Exactly. So when it comes to visas for staying longer, the article talks about the different options. Citizens of EU countries have it easier. They can move and work in Sweden more freely.
Makes sense.
But if you're from somewhere else, you usually need a job offer from a Swedish company to get a work visa.
Right.
Now, they do mention a self-employment visa, which could work if you're a freelancer, but you have to prove you have enough money to support yourself.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about if you work for yourself.
Right. So getting your finances set up in Sweden, that's another big step.
For sure.
The article explains how to open a bank account there, which usually means showing your ID and going to the bank in person.
Okay.
And you might need a Swedish tax ID number too.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. Sweden is almost completely cashless.
Right.
Everyone uses cards and digital payments. So the article suggests maybe looking into international banks or travel cards, like Wise, Revolut, or Monzo.
Right.
Those can often give you better exchange rates and lower fees.
Makes sense. Yeah, having those digital banking options is so important in Sweden. It just makes everything easier.
Totally. And of course, we have to talk about taxes.
Right.
The article says taxes in Sweden are high, but the system is fairly simple.
Okay.
You pay taxes on what you earn in Sweden, and the rates usually go up the longer you live there.
Okay.
And if you're earning money from outside Sweden, they recommend talking to an accountant who knows about international taxes, just to make sure you're doing everything right.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to understand the taxes from the beginning. It's crucial for planning your finances and avoiding problems later.
Right. Now, if you're thinking about being a digital nomad in Sweden, the article highlights their internet. It's incredibly fast and pretty cheap. Like, they're ranked 3rd in the world.
Wow.
Yeah. They mention the self-employment visa. Again, that's the one for staying long-term if you're a freelancer or work for yourself. And they say there are lots of great co-working spaces, especially in Stockholm and Gothenburg. Those usually cost between $200 and $450 a month, but they often come with perks like high-speed internet, printers, and chances to network.
Yeah, that amazing internet and all those co-working spaces, that makes Sweden a really good choice if you work remotely and you're looking for a great place to live.
For sure. So to wrap up all the important stuff, the article gives a nice summary of the pros and cons of moving to Sweden. The pros are a big focus on freedom and equality, high quality of life, beautiful nature, and a real commitment to being environmentally friendly.
Right.
The cons are international schools can be pricey, the cost of living in general is high, there might be a housing shortage, which can be tough when you first get there.
Yeah.
And of course, the taxes are higher.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that summary is super helpful to weigh the good and the bad and see what's important to you.
Yeah, exactly. So the bottom line is, living in Sweden might be more expensive than some other places, but it often comes with a really high quality of life and a focus on things like work-life balance and taking care of the environment.
Right.
So listener, after this deep dive into Christina Great's article, you should have a lot to think about as you plan for 2025.
Yeah.
Now is the time to really think about how this fits with what you want. Does that focus on work-life balance really speak to you? Does the cost of living seem doable for you? Based on everything we've talked about, Do you still think Sweden could be a good next step for you?
That's a great point. And it makes me think, given how much Sweden values work-life balance and individual well-being, what are you willing to change in your own life to get that same kind of fulfillment no matter where you end up living? Maybe take some time to check out those resources mentioned in the article, or even do some more research on cities like Stockholm and Gothenburg.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Could be the next step in your journey.
Go.